Gentlemen, in March of this year, in the city of San Salvador, Republic of El Salvador, the President of the United States, a very wise man, stood with the President of El Salvador and said, there is a threat that is affecting Central America. It affects all of us. We need a new partnership, which he calls the Partnership for Citizen Security in Central America. And ladies and gentlemen, I endorse, support, applaud, and am prepared to do everything in my power to follow up on the President's commitment to move this partnership forward. I will do so together with all other parts of my government based upon some very simple principles. And some of them are difficult principles. For example, number one, we have limited resources to work with. On the 23rd of June, in the city of Guatemala, the Secretary of State committed $290 million from the United States government to support this effort in the course of this year. Not 2.9 billion, not 29 billion, 290 million. And I have to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, to get to this number, I had to offer her some old money that was still available for spending this year, a little bit of new money, and some creative thinking in terms of how we can recycle existing funds. I do not see, unless you think I'm missing something, I do not see the likelihood of a vast infusion of new funds coming from that element of the United States government that is constitutionally entitled to fund and appropriate the taxpayers' money in the United States in the foreseeable future. So my first principle is we have to have an approach that accepts the reality that we have limited resources. Second principle, if you've got limited resources, how can you expand your resource base? How can you build on the number of donors that are prepared to support this effort? There are some that are already very much, and in some cases, heroically engaged in this effort. In no particular order, I would mention the governments of Canada, Colombia, Spain, the European Union and its Commission, the Inter-American Development Bank. This is a core group that has already, along with the government that I represent, committed its resources and its efforts to address this threat. Our challenge, principle number two, is how can we build on and expand that donor base? Principle number three, where we have fewer resources, can we, by reorganizing our effort, distributing the workload, focusing and prioritizing, sequencing in a different way, expand the impact of the limited resources that we have? This is complicated stuff, ladies and gentlemen, because a government's usual approach to this sort of problem is let's throw money at it. And without naming any other locations in the world, be they located in Central Asia or the Middle East, but I will name none, we have a very different set of realities that we must deal with in this complicated situation, and it does require an approach that is almost unprecedented among governments, international organizations, and even, if you would permit me to suggest an opinion, NGOs. Fourth principle, our starting point is that these are regional threats. They are not country-specific. They affect the entire Central American region. Therefore, the solution must be regional as well. This becomes complicated, as I will explain in a moment, because, again, the world for the last 60 or 70 years has been set up on the basis of bilateral relationships for the most part. If you've got a problem, government A works with government B to solve the problem. It is rare, not unprecedented, but rare that government A works with governments B, C, D, E, F, G, and H collectively and together to solve the problem at the same time. Principle number 5. The threats emanate from Central America. The leadership in the process must come from Central America. It cannot be an externally imposed solution. That does not work. It especially does not work when you're dealing with a limited resource base. Fortunately, we have an institution established by the 7 governments of Central America themselves that already exists and that is created and designed to accomplish just exactly this coordination purpose. It is called SICA. Gracias. And it represents all 7 of the governments of Central America and provides, if you will, regional leadership and buy-in to what the larger international community could do. And 6th and finally, and I'm fairly emphatic about this point, there are 2 partners who must be partners in this effort. For geographic reasons, for political reasons, for socio-economic reasons, for law enforcement reasons. We talk about this as the Central America Initiative. In many ways, we probably should talk about it as the Mesoamerican Initiative. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot address this issue involving the 7 governments of Central America without incorporating the governments of Colombia and Mexico into the solution. 2 countries that are in very different positions in terms of their historical development in addressing these problems, and by no means do you treat them as exactly the same sorts of governments in terms of their contribution, but you have to acknowledge you cannot solve, if that is the word I wish to use, Central America's crises without incorporating Colombia and Mexico into the solution. And there is finally a lesson that I submit we have all learned over the last 30 or 40 years, but we had better remember it today. There is no silver bullet solution. There is no one single program, one single project, one single operation that, if we do it and do it correctly, it will solve the problem. No, ladies and gentlemen, it took us many, many years to get into this mess, and it is going to take years to get out of it. And we have learned over time, starting, if you will, in the 1970s, that as you address these law enforcement and drug-related threats, you have to have an approach that addresses all elements of the problem, from education, treatment, and rehabilitation at one end, the demand side, all the way down through interdiction, money laundering and financial crimes, precursor chemicals, production capabilities, cultivation on the supply side. You cannot focus on only one element. If you do, the criminal organizations have proved to be masters at developing a workaround and actually using your focus and priority as the means by which they facilitate and improve their own networks and their own operations.